Janitor. Testing. Alright, here we go. I just want to clear this up once and for all before I start the video.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not trying to tell a terrible joke. I'm telling you the actual truth when I say this, and I need you to understand this before I start this video. I love the prequels.
Right.
I love it when they are bad.
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
I love it when they are good.
My brother Anakin!
I love to make fun of them. I love to watch people make fun of them. I love the memes, but most importantly, when I was a boy and I saw episode 1, I was completely blown away. And by the time I saw Revenge of the Sith, I felt my Star Wars journey had been completed by George Lucas. He didn't try to subvert my expectations, he didn't try to recklessly shove his agenda down my throat. He gave me exactly what I needed, a tragic epic that came to a horrific end after one bad day, and subsequently gave birth to a series of events that would become the Star Wars. Say whatever you want about these movies, you're entitled to your own opinion. But making a sci-fi fantasy epic love story with characters I actually care about is not a feat that can easily be done. And I don't think anyone has even come close to achieving the emotional climax that George Lucas was able to achieve in his movies. Now, with that being said, there's some stuff in these movies that don't make a ton of sense. Some people would call them plot holes. Other people say George Lucas just had so many ideas moving in his head he couldn't fit it into all 3 movies.
Ironic.
You see, if you watch Revenge of the Sith, Yoda kind of seems like a dumbass, but then when you fill it in with the Clone Wars, you find out Yoda had a whole bunch of other shit going on in his life besides just sitting around and meditating. I've been accused a couple hundred times of talking shit about the Clone Wars. All I did was say it's a stupid idea for Disney to rely on a cartoon show they canceled to explain why Maul is still alive in the movie Solo.
By putting him in this movie, you're basically saying that you also have to watch Star Wars: The Clone Wars cartoon series, episode 21, season 4 to understand that he's still alive.
That's not talking shit about the Clone Wars, that's talking shit about Disney's lazy-ass storytelling methods in their movies. It's a perfect metaphor for them using the past as a crutch to lift up their own Star Wars while simultaneously shitting all over it. But in that same video, I said that after they killed off Maul in Rebels, there's virtually nothing you can do with this character anymore. And I might have been wrong about that one because
He is the key to everything.
Dave Filoni used Maul and Ahsoka's interaction in a way that makes Anakin's story in Revenge of the Sith extremely more compelling and tragic. There's something about this arc that captures a lot of the same emotions I had watching the prequel trilogy. Yet the episode expands on all the lore that was briefly touched on in those movies. Not to mention this episode is beautiful. It has some of the best art direction I've seen in this show. There's one thing that Dave Filoni understands about Star Wars, and that's how to take the themes that George Lucas created and expand upon them. When this arc began, I was along for the ride almost immediately. Is that a Last Jedi reference? No! I enjoyed this arc so much that I even enjoyed all of the Last Jedi references.
You what?
Anakin's first appearance in the arc was perfect. It does a good job of showing how powerful he really is leading up to Revenge of the Sith. His confidence here is fun, and I always welcome any addition to the lore that shows how strong with the Force Anakin is. Obi-Wan beat Anakin when Anakin was fueled with rage, but look how much more powerful he seems here compared to Obi-Wan when he is calm and level-headed. His demeanor here reminds me of his sons in Return of the Jedi.
Now we're
Also, we might consider this as one of their last battles together before the events of Revenge of the Sith. Think about this. When Anakin was calm and level-headed, he outmaneuvered the Separatist and won, while it seems Obi-Wan was just trying to use brute force. During their battle, Obi-Wan learns from this and sees Anakin just pummeling him with brute force. So instead of returning that brute force, he learns from Anakin and outmaneuvers him because he knows Anakin's rage has consumed his ability to think tactically. Or I'm just looking too far into it, I don't know. I was prepared for this to take place during Revenge of the Sith, but it still caught me by surprise to learn we were already hanging out with Anakin directly after he killed Dooku. Just that fact put me on the edge of my seat and ready to gobble up all the other Star Wars Revenge of the Sith references they were going to start throwing at me. Good thing I was hungry because they served me a big fat plate of
Hello there.
You have these two characters that haven't really interacted. They're basically the ones left over, the ones that don't have a place in the movie. But this episode embraces that and takes it to a place where it would realistically go. Two people who have nothing in common except for knowing the other player on the board. And as soon as they discover they're still on opposite sides of the playing field, I think it's safe to say they've been properly acquainted. My favorite part about this interaction is how much more weight it adds to Order 66.
I was not privy to my master's plan, but now I see it. He turned the Jedi's own army against them.
It helps show how Sidious really was a mastermind behind everything. The clones didn't just follow Order 66, they were programmed for it, and that program is so deeply ingrained in them that fighting against it is like fighting for your life. This makes the events of Revenge of the Sith more believable when the clones start firing on the Jedi they were previously taking orders from. I also really enjoyed the horror Maul felt towards what was to come.
You're all going to burn! We're all going to die! You don't know what you're doing!
If a guy like Maul is scared, then you know something f***ed up is about to happen. It shows that the entire plan to make the Jedi fall really all revolved around Palpatine playing 4D chess to make Order 66 happen. And once that happened, there was no turning back. Maul is so scared of Sidious he would rather die than lose to Ahsoka because he knows if he doesn't come out on top, he will just wind up in Sidious's hands again. A fate he considers worse than death.
Let me go. Let me die!
The Clone Wars also does an excellent job of showing the Republic didn't just turn on the Jedi in one day.
The Jedi running around, starting wars.
There was a growing mistrust of the Jedi for a long time now, and people were ready to get rid of them after Palpatine successfully made public opinion turn on them. The Siege of Mandalore also does a great job of showing how close Anakin was to not turning to the dark side. In his final days before becoming Vader, he became increasingly aggravated. Obi-Wan was like a brother to him, but what Anakin really needed was a friend or a father figure. Obi-Wan's guidance always tended to favor whatever the Council needed, and the Clone Wars does an excellent job of showing that what the Council needed was flawed. The Jedi truly had lost their way, and because of that they were unable to help Anakin when he needed guidance the most. Anakin needed someone like Ahsoka to talk to.
Ahsoka, I'm so glad.
We'll have to catch up another time.
Someone to tell him that there is another way to save Padme, or that his vision was not set in stone and he could overcome it. We see throughout the arc Ahsoka wanting to make contact with Anakin after her fight with Maul, and maybe if she would have gotten through to him before the arrest of the Chancellor, he might have been able to resist the temptation of the dark side. If Ahsoka was able to tell Anakin that Palpatine was pulling his strings all along, do you really think that he would have helped kill Mace Windu?
What have I done?
One of my favorite parts about Star Wars is when it gets dark, and that's what I like about these final episodes. It's crazy to me to think that we see Ahsoka and Anakin's relationship go from a happy reunion to Ahsoka coming face to face with what she feared, her fallen master turned to the dark side who was a former shell of himself. He has no place in his heart for Ahsoka anymore as a Vader. This is tragic to see their relationship fall this far, but is also beautiful because we see even one of the people closest to Anakin couldn't save him after he became Vader. The only person that would be able to do it would be his son. And that moment is ultimately the climax of Star Wars. And I think this scene with Vader not holding back against trying to kill Ahsoka adds more weight to when he does finally turn back to the light side for Luke. Dave is really good at making the old stuff even better instead of just trying to shove a bunch of new shit down your throat. The Phantom Apprentice allows you to watch that realization on someone else's face for the first time that Anakin will become Vader. Ahsoka can't begin to comprehend that her courageous master would become a dark, twisted Sith Lord. We as the audience know what's coming, but we understand from Ahsoka's perspective that it's unbelievable. Being able to experience it first through her eyes allows us to relive those moments again, and it allows us to see from a different person's point of view. That point of view being Maul and Ahsoka's. One can't accept that her master would fall victim to such a terrible thing, and one that has experienced it firsthand. Maul understands the pain and suffering of being Palpatine's apprentice, but he also understands the power. He wants nothing more than to take that power away from Anakin. Hopefully someday we see a version of on-screen Maul vs. Vader, because when they did it in the comics, it was one of the best Star Wars fights I've ever read. Ahsoka vs. Maul was a perfect way to end this series. Not only was this a badass lightsaber fight, I love it when Ahsoka drives her lightsabers into things and uses it to change momentum. It's just a sick concept. I will never get tired of seeing it. It was way better than using the Force to block a lightsaber. But it's not just about the battles and the lightsabers, it's about the story behind this fight. The story being two fallen apprentices still fighting for what they believe in. The Phantom Apprentice also manages to make Maul a more compelling villain than before. I had no idea that was possible. Why the hell didn't they have this guy help with the movies? I've seen a few reviews about this arc and some people seem to be complaining that none of it matters because we already know what happens and therefore they can't get invested in the story. And knowing what happens isn't enough to make a story uninteresting. The reason why a lot of fans turn to the Clone Wars is because they want to know how it happens. How do these events fall into place like this? And watching how it happens can be enjoyable enough instead of bitching about the series because you think you know how it all ends. No one knows how Ahsoka's story ends yet. Finding out more about the journey will add to that ending. Not to mention Clone Wars is already a prequel series, so complaining that you already know how it ends doesn't really make a lot of sense. We've all known how it ends since 1983. The Clone Wars does an amazing job at lifting the prequels up and showing how beautiful the story really is. These episodes help me remember what it means to be a prequel fan. Some people may give them shit, but every time I watch them, I still feel the same emotions of being awestruck at the gigantic scale and world George Lucas created for his universe. Thanks to all my patrons, Elliot, Nicholas, Caleb, Dakota, Frankie, Jake, Nikolai. I always like saying that last name. Nikolai. You got a cool name, Nikolai. Hey, thanks for tuning in, guys. What a crazy time to be alive. There's so much information and fear everywhere. It's hard to know who to trust, but if there's one person you can trust, it's your local high school janitor. I see a lot of people don't respect the janitors or understand what we really do. But during a pandemic, if you can find me and give me $20, I'll be able to tell you where to buy ketamine.